Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Chizito. On Spectrum tonight, Uganda prepares to mark 50 years of independence, but has the country learned any lessons from its turbulent history? This year, Uganda marks 50 years of independence from colonialist Britain. The landmark event has stirred up enormous interest among several stakeholders who are preparing under different fora to usher in the day on the 9th of October. Equally important, this process has generated a lot of debate about how the country has been managed from the colonial times to date. Statistics show most Ugandans today have only experienced life under the NRM leadership, which has been in power longer than all previous governments combined. But the political, social and economic realities of Uganda date back to the pre-colonial era, and unless the country puts into perspective all these realities, we may not appreciate the journey of the country Uganda. Key events that have happened in Uganda from the time it attained independence have shaped the country's conscience, and many controversial ones remain unresolved. There is even a debate on whether Uganda is truly a nation, looking at all the differences that have emerged. So tonight we put the history of Uganda in perspective to try to understand if at all we have learnt our lessons and are ready to move the country forward. Our guest is Dr. Mwambusi Ndebesa, a senior historian at Makerere University. You're most welcome, Dr. Ndebesa.
Thank you. I'm actually
Mr. Ndebesa.
Yes.
Talk to us about 50 years of independence. Do you attach any significance to it?
Maybe before that, since we are discussing issues of independence, we may a little bit need to go back and see where we came from. Listeners out there should know that Uganda, as a country, has existed since 1894, at least formally. So it is roughly 118 years as a country, but not yet a nation, in my opinion, because for 68 years we were under colonial rule. In fact, now we are going to mark 50 years. Colonial rule, I think, was marked in 1944. And actually there were celebrations by the British in 1944 that they had ruled Uganda for 50 years. And it is that turning point that really it was a wake-up call for the Africans, because the British in 1944, when they were marking 50 years, they didn't seem to be ready to go. They still were looking at being here for another 50 years, but when that was demonstrated in that celebration by the British, then the Africans woke up and said, no, we must stop this trend if it is going to continue until another 50 years or so. So I thought people need to know that in that regard, Uganda existed since 1894. But Ugandans have been existing here from time immemorial.
Yes.
Actually, Uganda is said to be one of those areas which said could be the origin of man. If you want, the Garden of Eden could have been in Uganda, since it is not geographically located. And I think it has some truth, because they have done some archaeological evidence that East Africa could be the cradle of man. Maybe one could even surmise and speculate that since Uganda has got the highest number of gorillas who are nearer to man, then Uganda could be the cradle of mankind. So, but otherwise, in terms of a country, it existed in 1894 when the British declared Uganda a British protectorate. But we have been independent, and they were here for 68 years, and we have been independent since 1962,
yes,
which makes now 50 years. So we are more, the colonialists were here 68 years. We haven't
We haven't matched that time.
We haven't matched that time.
All right.
Yeah.
So 50 years is a significant milestone. Do you think we've achieved much in those 50 years?
Well, I don't think we have achieved much, but we have achieved. First of all, in 1894, we were defined by the British. At least since 1962, we have had the opportunity to define ourselves as a people. Now, there could be pitfalls here and there, and indeed they have been there. Some 2 steps backwards, 1 step backward, forward, 1 step forward, and 2 steps backward. But as somebody said, was it Elston or somebody like that, is that if anybody has never made a mistake, then he has never tried anything. So we have tried, but I don't think we have achieved fundamental changes. I don't think so, because if you look at the political arena, we have not actually broken certain barriers in terms of, for example, transiting from authoritarian rule to democratic rule, transiting from individual rule to institutional rule, so that we allow institutions to govern and individuals just come in to as agents of governance, but you have institutions which mediate between the different classes and social groups in society. We've not gone very much away from ethnic politics and ethnic attitudes and thinking. In terms of economy, we are still, the British left us with a hand hoe, and we are still using a hand hoe, and I don't think that is great transformation. In terms of population structure, the majority of the people, maybe more than 15% or are thereabout, are still peasants. We have not transited to industrial society and an urban society. However, I think we have made some strides, we have learned some lessons, and I think those lessons, we can improve from those lessons, considering that also, at least we know that it is we, the indigenous people, who are in charge of governing this country, and I think any society should feel proud that they are governing themselves, although we may have messed up in some aspects of governance, but we are governing ourselves, and we are planning, and maybe if we sit and reflect in the on the last 50 years, we could find ways of improving on where we have had pitfalls, so that we go ahead. But the most important thing is that we should stop and reflect, because some people may think that they have a correct line and they are on the right track, and therefore they don't need to stop and reflect. I think that will be unfortunate. But the most important thing is that you can fail, you can fall down, but the most important thing is that you should learn from your failure. And I think this period at 50, we should reflect on our failures and successes, and then see how to move forward.
Listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight, as you're going to prepare to mark 50 years of independence, we ask the question, has the country learned any lessons from its turbulent history? Our guest is Mr. Mwambusia Ndebesa. He's a historian, senior historian at Makerere University, where he is a lecturer. You'll be able to contribute to this discussion at some stage. Let's talk about politics. Has our politics matured? You said before, we haven't changed much.
Yes, I could pick on some aspect of politics, like the electoral politics in this country. Of course, we had the opportunity to have universal adult education, not adult education, adult suffrage in 1961. And we had elections where we elected a government that was called Internal Self-Government, headed by the late Benedicto Kiwanuka. The problem with that election was that it was marred by violence, especially in the central region, here in Buganda. There was intimidation, there was arson, there was violence. Actually, the majority of the people in Buganda did not vote. Those who registered to vote did not vote. And that legacy has stayed with us up to now. Not in its entirety as it was then, but we still have intimidation in politics. We had them in 61, we had them in 62 general elections, we had them actually in the UPC primaries in 1971 before Obote was overthrown. We had this intimidation in 1980 elections. We have had them since the NRM elections have taken place, until even last week there was such a violence and intimidation here in the by-election in Jinja. And therefore, I think we need to do something about elections. And even the culture of rigging elections, it was there in 1962, especially, when, especially I recall in Buganda here, in the central region, the DP victory was heavily rigged by the Mengo Electoral Commission, which was partisan. So the problem of a partisan electoral commission has not just started, and it needs improvement. 3 is that our elections have been for some time identified with militarization of political competition, especially the elections since 1980.
Yes.
It has been marred with intimidation and militarization. And this has become even the culture in the minds of the Ugandans, because you find that in most cases they would want a candidate who has got a military background.
Yes.
You can see BSJ versus Museveni.
Yes.
Kotapin politics versus the Hammer.
Senyondo.
The Senyondo. And unless we put a break there. By the way, the developed democracies started like that also, with militarizing political competition, and many military officers and the personnel being in the government. If we take Europe, it is indeed in the 1940s you still had the General Francois, in France,
Charles de Gaulle
in France. But since the 1960s, I think they have, even America, they had those. But yes, since the 1960s, you can see that the military was rolled back. Even when you go to Japan, there was a military at the beginning of the last century, but it was rolled back. So how are we going to make sure that the military remains with its mandate, and the military personnel remain with their mandate, i.e. to protect the nation, to defend the nation, and the state generally, but not to come into political competition, because otherwise the military ethos are not used to civilian competition.
Yes, tolerance and so on.
Yes, and they even bring them in parliament. You know, the other day there was an argument before when they were legislated that there should be 10 members from UPDF.
Yes.
There was an argument which was not logical. There was an argument to the effect that if you don't bring them here, so that maybe they are controlled or they see what is going on here, they may take over. But those people forgot that even in 1980, after 1980 elections, the then Uganda National Liberation Army
yes,
also had representatives in parliament. I think the Oito Jokers, the late, were in parliament. The Tito Keros were in parliament. 10 of them.
Yes.
It did not stop the military
from taking over.
So I think we need to rethink the military. The military is necessary, but it should have its mandate. So otherwise we could also say that let the judiciary be represented in parliament if we think that all critical areas, all critical arms,
right,
or critical institutions should be represented there. I don't know. I could also argue that Makerere University or universities, public universities, should be represented also.
Right.
Yes.
Do you think we got independence too early? Some people think we messed it up. We should have waited a little longer, maybe another 20 or 40 years.
No. I don't think we should have waited any longer. Definitely, to have freedom is very critical and important. And secondly,
is it an end in itself, freedom?
No, let me first address the other issue. Secondly, let's not always think that we need time to do certain things because the others also took that time. No, we can learn. We are lucky that we can learn from the pitfalls of the others and therefore fast track, if I can use the current language. Because the time it took Western Europe to be industrialized is not the time that Japan took. It's not the time that South Korea or Malaysia or Singapore has taken. So we can learn from the pitfalls of the others, and then for us, we fast track. So this argument of saying that, you see, we need time, we are still young, no, this is a different era, and if we continue like that and say, you cannot have, for example, you cannot use a laptop or a computer because you do not know, you did not pass through the stage of using a typewriter, to me is wrong. And you can't say because you did not pass through the Bronze Age, you must first pass through the Bronze Age before you come to the computer age. No, we can learn from experiences elsewhere and fast track our social and political transformation. And I think that's what we should do in the next 50 years.
Well, you say we've not grown our democracy. It's still based on ethnic politics, and institutional rule is watered down at the altar of individual rule. What do you mean? We have elections every 5 years. The winner takes it.
The kind of elections we are having and the kind of that democracy we are having is what some people have characterized as procedural democracy, as opposed to substantive democracy.
Yes.
Because democracy, if we go into its origin, is that it should be including people, so that there is rule of people. You allow people, you allow citizens to be citizens, by the way. You move away from subjects. You see, a citizen is not necessarily, or citizenship does not necessarily mean belonging to a certain territorial unit and having rights to belong there. That is one aspect of citizenship. Actually, the real interpretation of that concept of citizenship is for somebody to participate actively in public affairs and participate in decision-making processes that determine his or her future. That is real citizenship.
Yes.
So do we have women's citizenship? Do we have business citizenship? Do we have student citizenship? Do we have peasant citizenship? Do we have various kinds of citizenship in respect of all these forces contributing to the governance or public governance of this country, whether it is economic governance, whether it is political governance? Are they participating? And until we do that, then I think we still have a long way to go to have democracy. Definitely, the road to democracy, even in the so-called democratic countries, is not over. The journey is still going on. But at least we should move certain steps ahead. And one of the criteria or one of the things we should do is to increase citizenship. That is, to increase participation of people. And to do that one, we could carry out political awareness and education. But also those who are in charge of governance should create more space, should leave more space for people to come in. But they may not do it easily. Let the citizens make sure that they enter into this public space, and by all means they become citizens and they stop being mere subjects of those in power, and expand this space and make sure that if there are stones, cockroaches, snakes, lizards, crocodiles in this political space, we collectively remove these obstacles to public governance.
All right. Now, let us talk about the Buganda independence, which apparently came before the Ugandan independence. But first, we'll go for a break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about that. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. Stay tuned. We'll be back.
John, Mike, and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special. You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Special fares to the US, London, China, and India, with extra baggage allowance on selected flights. To book your flight, contact your local travel agent or call us on 041-7800-900 or book online at QatarAirways.com/UG. Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
Terms and conditions apply.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 is brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back on Spectrum. Tonight, Uganda prepares to mark 50 years of independence. Has this country learned any lessons from its turbulent history? Our guest is Mr. Mwambusi Ndebesa, senior historian at Makerere University. You'll be able to contribute to this topic at some stage. Mr. Ndebesa, can you talk to us about what happened like 2 years before independence? What kind of things did we see there?
Maybe we talk about, there are very many things that did happen, but maybe we talk about it in respect of the Buganda.
Yes.
Of the Buganda factor. Otherwise, before independence, 2 years before independence, very many things happened. Maybe I can even talk about the formation of political parties.
You can talk to us about that, then later you'll explain to us the significance of the so-called the Buganda independence.
Most of the political parties, actually, apart from DP, which was founded in 1954, were founded around that, because UPC was founded in 1960. I think March or thereabout.
Yes.
When the Uganda National Congress, Obote Wing, and the Uganda People's Union merged to form UPC.
Right.
And I think KY was founded just Kabaka Yeka, that is, just towards independence. There were other small independent parties which were founded, but they just fizzled out. But those 2 years also witnessed a lot of constitutional talks. There were, I think, commissioned reports, the Wild report and the Morris report. So there are very many activities that took place around that time. And then there was a question of Buganda, which was very critical.
Yes.
In 1958, for the first time, the Legislative Council, or the then Parliament, if you want.
Yes, the LEGO.
Yes, for the first time, it was composed of the majority Africans. Because since it was founded in the 1920s, it was always dominated by, or actually originally before 1940s, our Legislative Council then was dominated by Indians and the English, the British. But for the first time in 1958, there were more Africans on the Legislative Council. Unfortunately, Buganda refused to send its representatives, the 5 who had been allocated to Buganda. They refused. They boycotted because they thought that their status was not clearly defined, how they would be in an independent Uganda. And they continued along those politics. Disorganized people like Musazi, who when he identified himself with the cause of Buganda, the rest of Uganda ran away from him. And we missed that nationalist at independence. And so in 1960, they even threatened to become autonomous and declare the independence. Was it 60 or 61? I'm not sure exact date. But it never happened anyway. And the British as the...
But Buganda apparently got independence in 1960.
No, it never got. It's
give us the background. Give us the explanation. What exactly happened?
It's because of that politics where they wanted to keep their special status and the special status for the Kabaka in an independent Uganda. And they were threatening, as I told you, in 1958, they refused to join the Legislative Council.
Yes.
They remained outside. And in 1961, even when Chiwanuka won,
Benedict Chiwanuka.
Yes, Mengo actually became jittery, and they said, "Oh, you mean anybody in was still in Muganda is going to be above the Kabaka?" then there was a problem there, and that's why they formed a party called Kabaka Yeka.
Yes.
It's supposed to be a national party, but it's talking about only the Kabaka king alone.
Right.
So, and they just said, if you, the British, are not going to give us, in our relationship with the rest, a special status, so that, for example, our elections are different and this and that, we are going to go it alone. And they threatened to have what in Rhodesia or Zimbabwe now is unilateral declaration of independence from the British. And they set a date, but it never was anyway. And even if it was, the British were still in control.
Yes.
And Uganda was not a failed state at that time.
Right.
They would have possibly, God forbid, they would have possibly re-exiled the Kabaka, because in 1953
yes.
he had been exiled.
Seychelles, I think.
No, he was exiled in Britain.
Britain, right?
Yes, the Seychelles, it was his
Mwanga.
grandfather Mwanga,
who died there in the end.
Yes, and so there it was. But then somehow there was a political compromise,
right,
between the British, especially Buganda, and the UPC, to have Buganda have a special kind of arrangement in terms of having their people go to parliament, the national parliament. And also the question of federalism, where Buganda was given that status of a federal status within an independent Uganda.
Yes.
So they were granted those concessions. One, the federal status, and two, that Buganda would be given, I think, 21 seats in the National Assembly, who would be elected by the Constituent College, i.e. the Ruchiko, which I think had about 89 people, to the National Assembly. So they would always have people in the National Assembly elected by the Ruchiko, and therefore, in a way, answerable to the Ruchiko, not the citizens who elected them. They were given that status, but I don't think it was a good arrangement. And actually, that arrangement did not last long, because we had that arrangement work from 62 October, but by 1966, that arrangement was never there. So the question of Buganda versus Uganda, the relationship of Buganda versus Uganda, has continued up today. The question of Mengo and the center is still with us. Of course, I think the current Mengo has relented. They would not want that arrangement possibly of 1962.
Yes.
It is only extreme ones who would want that arrangement. But still, they are asking for a special arrangement. And I have had the occasion to talk to some of them, and I have told them that actually, the debate is not whether we should have federal or not. Maybe we could find that there is a good use for federal, and it can work. But it should not be federal for only Buganda.
It should be for all the tribal.
It should be for everybody. We need to have a uniform system of administration. But if they think Buganda can go it alone, like at one time I normally see them mobilizing the citizens to go to demonstrate and express and send the message to the center, like going to parliament. But they mobilize only people from Buganda, whereas I think there are
it should be national, other tribal kingdoms.
I think there are other kingdoms, not only kingdoms, even non-kingdom people like the Acholi or the Rangi, who now want federalism. They should mobilize them so that when you are going to parliament, it is a national cause. Right. But if you continue going to parliament as only Buganda, it gives some people some question marks there, that how can now
jingoism?
How can now Buganda go it alone?
Right.
Yeah. If there is federalism, let it be for the whole country.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how Sir Edward Mutesa became president, and a little bit, and then also the origin of militarism. When did violence creep into our political side?
Beginning with the question of Mutesa, it was that kind of political negotiation at independence, because Kabaka Yeka. Let me go a little bit. So when there were elections in 1962, the general elections now, they were won by UPC. But UPC did not have what they call a comfortable majority.
Yes.
Because in such an arrangement, you could not form a government when your party did not have more than 50. Didn't have 51%.
Yes.
So UPC actually did not have. I don't recall how many seats it had, but maybe something like 34. When DP had something like 24, and the KY, not KY now, Buganda now had about 21, or KY if you want.
Right.
So it could not form a government. They would not be allowed to form a government. So there was a negotiation between UPC
And KY.
To form a coalition government, an alliance. And so they formed an alliance, and therefore they had a comfortable majority, and they were allowed to form a government. So through those negotiations between UPC and KY, I think they struck a deal that when the UPC leader becomes the executive prime minister, then
the president,
the ceremonial president would be the head of KY, who was Kabaka.
Right.
And that is how he became the president of Uganda. But I want the population out there, the listeners out there, to know that actually Mutesa became the president of Uganda in 1963, not 62.
Yes, how?
The political arrangement with the British was such that after independence, or a government of independence is elected into office, there would be 1 year when the governor would remain as head of state.
Governor Andrew Cohen.
Not Cohen. Cohen had already left. Even another one, I think Crawford Young had also left.
Yeah.
It was Walter Coates.
Walter Coates, okay.
Somebody like that.
The one commissioned the Mulago Hospital, gone.
Yeah, so the governor remained for 1 year.
Right.
And then later Parliament sat as a constituent, as a college. And there was actually an amendment in the constitution to provide for the office of the ceremonial president, who would always be elected from among the traditional leaders of Uganda.
Oh.
Yes, and that is why in 1963, even those who didn't have traditional leaders started electing them,
right,
or appointing them, or having them. So the Bachiga had Rutachirwa, he started also looking for feathers, and the Teso started having one, the Bajisu started having one. So every tribal community in Uganda started having a traditional leader with the view
of becoming
in the future they would have a president from their tribe.
It was supposed to be rotational.
I don't know whether they would elect, but at least they would have a candidate.
Right.
And in that arrangement, after amending the constitution, when they went to parliament, of course, because of the other alliance, political alliance between KY and UPC, then they kind of agreed that the president would be Kabaka Mutesa II,
yes, and
the vice president was going to come from a traditional leader, but from UPC.
Right.
And it happened to be Nadiope, the then Chabazinga of Busoga.
Right.
We don't know what would have happened after the expiry of the term of office of Kabaka Mutesa. Who else was going to be there? That was also going to be, I think, a conflictual politicking.
Yes.
But it never was. Anyway, in 1966, he was attacked and exiled by the then president, and an interim constitution was put in place, where I am told the office of the Attorney General, of course, liaising with the executive, with the Prime Minister, or the then Prime Minister, they drafted a constitution, took it to the Parliament, put it in the pigeonholes of members of Parliament, and when they convened, they were told to get the draft.
You're talking about the 1967 Constitution?
66. Let's be very clear. 1966, to get it out of their pigeonholes and pass it. And indeed, people, because of their sycophancy, which is still with us, the sycophancy you see among the politicians, especially members of Parliament, has not started. It was there in 66. So they came and passed it because they were convinced by the then Prime Minister. That constitution is the one that made Prime Minister Obote become the president of Uganda. But I want to clear something before I go very far. People have confused the 67 constitution
with 1966.
With 66.
Yes.
The pigeonhole constitution
was the 1966.
Was the 1966 constitution.
67.
The 67 one, the Republican constitution, was they came about after Parliament, which sat as a constituent college for about a month, deliberated on the draft
and
passed it.
All right. So the 66 one was the pigeonhole one.
Yeah, but 67 was debated by Parliament sitting as a constituent college.
All right.
So people confuse the two.
All right. You made it clear for us.
Yes,
now.
yes.
Why was it more natural for KY to go with UPC, which was led by a Northerner, and leaving DP, which was led by a Muganda?
I don't know the natural thing. If the natural thing is that the traditions have been there for some time and therefore they become natural, it could be that actually Kabaka Mutesa and Obote both shared one religion. They were all Protestants. You don't forget that one. But secondly, again, I think that Mengo, which was dominated by Protestants, had always wanted to perpetuate that dominance
of the religion. So religion was more important.
Religion, I think, took center stage. But also, I think some people say that Chuanuka, the head of DP,
he spoke bad words against the kingdom.
Sounded to be insubordinate to the Kabaka. And actually, any politician from Buganda who wants to be the national leader, the president of Uganda, is likely to face that problem, that challenge of relating with Mengo and relating with the Kabaka, who is above the other.
Okay.
And in terms who has power, whether social power, political power, and who takes precedence over the other. That's a big problem.
For a Muganda president. Let's talk about the origin of militarism very briefly before you talk to us about the president and where you think we're going. We'd like to hear from the listeners.
Militarism.
When do we get the
militarism?
Was it since 1962 or did it just happen in 60s?
No, it is not 62. It was 66. That is where.
Some people think it dates back to 62. The seeds were sown in 62.
Well, the intimidation of Buganda may be, but that was not the military really. It was civilians coming in. It is basically not even 66, by the way. Let me mention this one. In 1964, there was also an incident in Buyaga and Bugangezi.
Yes,
we are talking about in the Lost Counties, which is presently Chibari.
Yes.
There was the question of the Lost Counties debate and referendum. And actually, Kabaka Mutensa went there, by then acting as a Kabaka of Buganda, at the same time President of Uganda, to campaign, like politicians campaign for support. But there was an unfortunate incident in a market. He took advantage of the market to campaign. And the citizens there, the Banyoro, were uncivil. They shouted at him, they booed him, and he ordered his troops to shoot. And some
not tear gas that time.
No, live bullets, and the people were shot down. They were shot dead. I'm not sure of the figure. Others say 5, others say less, something like that. But that was also kind of bringing in the military into politics, because later on also the central government of Obote started sending their soldiers.
Right.
And one time when they were passing around Nakulabi, they were booed. And just
that's the so-called Nakulabi incident.
Yeah, they just got out and shot innocent people who were excited about the question of Buyaga and Bugangezi. But unfortunately, the central government troops reacted negatively and shot people dead. And the center did not arrest them or punish them. I think that was the beginning of having militarism and impunity of shooting people, and without the central government or those in authority bring those to book. And later on, of course, the 66th incident when Obote used the military in order to resolve a political question.
Let's hear from our listeners right now. Our numbers, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. Our number is 041-4348-111, 031-226-0390, 031-226-1390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you are calling from. Mr. Ndebesa, do you think Uganda has stabilized? We've had violence in the past. Do you think we've got stability now?
I don't think we have stability. We may be having order, but order does not mean stability as such, because the question of Buganda versus the center, Mengo versus the center, is still there.
It's an important question.
It's an important question. The question of the military has not been resolved, and the question, and we have not had institutional mechanisms and procedures of mediating conflicts, because conflicts is part of life. But you must have civil and known mechanisms, established institutions to resolve those conflicts. Some would say they are there, but they are not. Otherwise, why do you see troops outside here at the Constitutional Square? That's not sustainable.
They're guarding the flowers.
And at all roundabouts. I mean, it's not sustainable. You must find a way of resolving the conflicts rather than having troops or policemen stationed at certain places in Kampala all the time. It's not sustainable.
We have a listener on the line. Your name, sir? We've lost him as fast as he came. Gone. Our numbers are 0414-348111, 0312-260-0390, 0312-261-390. It's Spectrum on Radio 1. Yes.
I'm saying that using the military.
Yes, your name?
Yes, Tumuinema.
Yes.
You see, I think we as Uganda, we have a lot to learn. Because remember where the genesis of the Uganda confrontation with central government on matters of who should govern, who should have more power, originates from KY entering negotiations with Dr. Obote. But remember, the Ugandan elite came out strong and won and told the local Uganda that please, Mutesa is to be awarded the post of presidency, constitution and government. Then he's going to have no power because remember, according to the British Constitution, which we are following by then, the president had no power. It was the prime minister, and this is the trick which Obote used. He took the position of prime minister. The local Uganda thought that the president, which was awarded to Mutesa, was superior, and by then that is how things cropped up. And again, up to today, the portion of Uganda remains crucial but not addressed. To me, the mass goodbye.
Spectrum, hello.
Good evening, Edmond.
Good evening, your name?
Yeah, thank you for John. I want to salute him for his articulation. But I have a very simple question to him. Our colonial master, were they doing it in a good faith to give power to country by then?
Spectrum, hello. Yes, your name?
My name is Eresu. I want to, there is an omission which has been made by the presenters. One omission is that at some point in 1964, then when the KY and the Kabaka on the one hand, who was the president of Uganda, and the UPC Obote government on the other side had a misunderstanding, and the Lukiko gave orders that the central government shifts the capital to outside Uganda within 24 hours. That's one point which should be realized as one incident in which the confrontation was going to take military action. And that is the very thing which broke the camel's back and Bulibiri was stormed, unfortunately. The other thing also, I think if we have to be objective, we must look at the constitution which was adopted by the British. There is a clause, there is an article in that, I think Article 64 or 62, I don't remember, which states that when the president doesn't assent to a parliamentary act, 3 times the prime minister can do it on his behalf. Now, that particular article empowered Obote as the prime minister at that time to assent an article to the referendum, which referendum was for those counties, and when he assented to that to the act, having been empowered by that constitutional provision, an open conflict developed between the president and the prime minister. The debate that we should have now between us is as to whether Obote did it in fulfillment of the constitution, or it was because he had other interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's get back to the studio. Mr. Ndebesa,
yes,
you can respond. Was the colonialism ended in good faith?
Was colonialism ended in good faith?
Did they give it to us with a good
After the 1950s, especially during the 1950s, when actually China had emerged as a power, a communist bloc, and the Soviet Union had also emerged as a big bloc, and the USA had actually submerged Europe in terms of economic development, it was realized that one way or the other, and then there were independence struggles in Africa, in Algeria, in Kenya, in wherever. It was realized that independence was coming anyway. And I think from that time, in 1950s, the British started preparing Ugandans for independence. It is Ugandans actually who were refusing that independence.
Oh.
Yes, in fact, Obote, who became the first prime minister, executive prime minister, he is quoted in the newspapers somewhere in 1950s,
yes,
for having said that independence should be delayed until the Northmen also acquire education as people in southern Uganda. And you can see Buganda was saying, don't give independence until our status is clear.
Yes.
And the Bamba and Bakonzo were saying, don't bring independence until the question of Bamba, Bakonzo versus Batoro is cleared. So the British really realized that, like any other person, the wind of change was passing over Africa. They were going to get independence. Ghana had got it in 57, and it was a good example for Africa. India had got it in 47, and I think the mood was for independence. However, where they didn't do things in good faith was, for example, when it came to negotiating the status of Buganda versus Uganda and the status of Chiwanuka versus Uganda. First of all, Chiwanuka had won elections, or DP, although they were not fair elections in the sense that there was intimidation in Buganda.
Right.
He was supposed to be in power for 5 years under internal self-government, and then there would be another elections after 67 until 71, I think, when they had planned to give us full independence. But within less than 1 year, the British had changed their mind and arranged another election.
Right.
It appears the British did not want to live in Uganda a Catholic,
right,
whom they thought would take Uganda into Italy or France.
Right.
Secondly, the church hierarchy, Canterbury, the Bishop of Canterbury, who was very influential, he could not take it. I think that I can leave that one. There was a question on UPC, military declaration of Buga, a statement from Mengo that the center should remove its capital. It was not 64. It was actually 1966.
That's what he said, yes.
After the disagreement.
Right.
And the background to it is that also UPC or Obote had not cooperated with KY.
Right.
At that time, I think even KY had dissolved itself. It had dissolved itself and said, let us go to UPC and disorganize it from within.
Yes.
So it was actually it was no longer a legal question. When things reach a certain level, they are no longer legal questions, they are political questions.
Right.
Obote should have found means and ways, maybe, of resolving issues through other means, but so is Mengo. I think they are both extreme, and I think it was not good.
Okay.
The assenting to the act or whatever,
and the lost counties.
Yes, that's why I'm saying at certain levels you resolve issues politically, but we needed mediation. We needed institutions to mediate.
Yes,
but there was ultra ethnic nationalism of Buganda and ultra unitarism mind of Obote, and the two clashed, and they took us that where it was. Right. That is why we need to think our politics and promote the values of political accommodation, political tolerance, political resolution of conflicts, rather than banking on the military. The military in politics is not sustainable. Right. I still insist. These policemen I see at we need to resolve the things politically.
They are not ready for the elections.
They were not there. The point I'm making is that having them and that roundabout
is not a good thing.
Is not sustainable. It could be good in the sense that it is keeping some law and order here, but it's not sustainable. You can't sustain the country like that by having soldiers
guarding
at roundabouts and the gardens.
We have to go, but maybe before we go, do you think, of course, the kind of thing you're talking about is they're already working on it. We have a Patriot patriotism desk in State House. So it's probably already being addressed. Do you think, finally, before we go, we are ready for takeoff? We've learned our lessons.
Patriotism or defining how Uganda should go is not a monopoly of State House.
Really?
It's a project of all Ugandans. And there should be mechanisms to have an inclusive project to define the future for Uganda.
Very briefly.
If you think there are people with a monopoly of ideas and the way forward, then this country will remain as it has been in the last 50 years.
Are we ready for takeoff? Are we stabilized? Yes or no?
We are not, but let us have in place efforts to stabilize.
We have to go. Thank you very much, Mr. Mwambusi Andebesa, lecturer at Makerere University, senior historian. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond Chizito. Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English. Do stay tuned.